There are over 130 people on death row in North Carolina. This is part 9 of the series. Terence Taylor, 27 years on death row. He was given 2 separate death sentences by the trial court on February 18, 1997, one for each of the 2-degree murder convictions. He murdered 2 men who died from multiple gunshot wounds and were reported to have been together when they were murdered at the same time in one single incident. Johnny Parker, 27 years on death row. Parker was found guilty on 2 charges of first-degree murder and given the death penalty in connection with the killings of Jerry Lee Dowdy and James William Buchanan. Billy Herring, the chief of the Roseboro Fire Department, was notified in the morning of October 2, 1994, that smoke was emanating from a residence situated at 201 Northeast Street in Roseboro, North Carolina. When firefighters arrived on the scene, they discovered Jerry Dowdy and James Buchanan's bodies. The downstairs flat belonged to Buchanan, while the upstairs apartment was occupied by Dowdy. Buchanan was discovered in his downstairs flat, lying on the bed. His body and the bed were on fire, and he had been shot in the face. In his upstairs apartment, Dowdy was discovered face down in a pool of blood on the kitchen floor. His private parts were removed, and he was nude from the waist down. He had blunt force injuries to his skull, as well as many chopping wounds to his hands and head. In the kitchen, officers discovered a bloody knife on the floor and blood and hair on an axe. A wallet that was empty was also discovered beneath Dowdy's left elbow. Roger Blakey, 27 years on death row. On May 13, 1996, Blakey was indicted for the first-degree murder of Kelly Washington Huntley. Blakey broke through a back window of his mother's house on April 15, 1996, somewhere between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m., with the intention of stealing anything valuable that he might sell. In addition to his mother's savings account deposit book, he took 3 of her rings, a short herringbone chain, a brown leather pouch, and about $4 in change. Then, he called his wife and informed her that he would return home shortly. Upon finishing his conversation with his spouse, the 76-year-old victim pulled up behind the residence. The victim had spent more than 2 decades living with Blakey's mother. As the woman entered the house, Blakey took cover in a small room behind the refrigerator. His confession, which was used as evidence during the trial, states that once Blakey entered the kitchen, the 2 got into a fight. He reported to the police that the victim grabbed him as he proceeded to walk away. He rushed towards the victim, took a pistol from his grasp, and struck the victim in the back of the head with the gun's butt. Kelly Washington Huntley began to bleed after collapsing face down onto the kitchen floor. Blakey claims that after a little more fighting, kerosene unintentionally leaked out of a metal can. He further stated that at some point during the battle, a cigarette he was smoking dropped out of his mouth. He claims that he lifted the victim off the ground, placed her in a chair, and bound her hands and legs with an electrical cord. Blakey then took $78 from the victim's wallet, drove away from the house, and left the neighborhood. 75% of the victim's skin was burned, according to the autopsy. Additionally, the victim had sustained injuries to the brain from wounds to the back and left temporal area of the head. She was awake for 3 to 5 minutes after the fire started, and the fire's production of carbon monoxide poisoning was the cause of death. Marcus Mitchell, 27 years on death row. On April 1, 1997, Marcus DeCarlos Mitchell was charged with 3 charges of first-degree murder in relation to the deaths of Robin Watkins, Dwayne Rogers, and Damian Armstrong. Following the victims' autopsies, the pathologist found that Watkins and Rogers had both been shot in the back of the head. Rodney Taylor, 26 years on death row. He was indicted for first-degree murder and for robbery with a dangerous weapon. On January 1st of 1998, Rodney and his brother, Terence Taylor, left the Hillcrest housing complex in Wilmington, North Carolina, with Brian Troy shortly before 6 p.m. and drove to Bryan Road. Rodney and Troy got out of the car and talked briefly. As Troy knelt on the road, Rodney shot him in the head and upper body. Rodney and Terence Taylor then returned to the apartment in the Hillcrest housing complex. Jeffrey Meyer, 25 years on death row. 2 first-degree murder charges, 1 first-degree burglary charge, and 2 counts of robbery with a dangerous weapon were brought against him. Meyer and Mark Thompson were Fort Bragg-based soldiers serving in the active service. With plans to break into the home of an elderly couple, Meyer and Thompson started keeping an eye on their residence. Meyer and Thompson's surveillance activities had led them to believe that Paul and Janie Cutts, the victims, were an elderly couple with 2 cars that they usually traveled in together. Meyer and Thompson, dressed in ninja suits, broke into the victim's home in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Surprised by Mr. Cutts, Meyer shot him with a blowgun, a martial arts weapon that launches sharp darts from a hollow tube. When Mr. Cutts continued to advance, Meyer stabbed and killed him with a butterfly knife. Meyer and Thompson also stabbed and killed Mrs. Cutts with butterfly knives. They stole jewelry, credit cards, and a television from the residence. They were soldiers. They were supposed to protect people. William Anthony, 25 years on death row. William Todd Anthony was indicted for first-degree murder of Samantha Belk Anthony and for assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, inflicting serious injuries on John Edward Belk. Anthony and Samantha Belk Anthony were married on October 26, 1985, and 2 children were born out of the marriage. Anthony and Samantha separated for several months in 1992. During their separation, Anthony wrecked Samantha's vehicle with his truck and grabbed her after allegedly seeing her with another man. Samantha told her father, John Edward Belk, that she was afraid for her life. Anthony eventually murdered both Samantha and her father. Isaiah Barden, 25 years on death row. He was found guilty of first-degree murder under felony murder rule and guilty of robbery with a dangerous weapon. Isaiah Barden and the victim, Felipe Resendez, were employed by Master Casings, a business located in Clinton, North Carolina. Barden was a machine operator, while the victim was a contract worker who cleaned the equipment in the evenings. The victim's responsibilities often required that he worked until 1 or 2 a.m., and he would close the business when he left. On Friday, March 27, 1998, the employees expected it to be a payday at Master Casings. Around 4:30 that afternoon, the victim cashed his paycheck at a bank, then began work at the plant at 6 p.m. He was still on the job when the plant janitor left the building at 10:30 p.m. The next morning, 2 workers found the lifeless victim lying face down in the plant. Although Barden at first denied any involvement in the victim's death, upon further questioning, he confessed. Andre Fletcher, 25 years on death row. On August 17, 1994, Georgia Ann Dayberry Hamrick, 83, was battered and knifed to death in her home in Spindale, Rutherford County, North Carolina. The state's evidence showed that Fletcher broke into the victim's home, beat her to find out where her valuables were, and then cut her throat. He took several rings, 2 of which he sold over the next couple of days for $250 and another one for $60. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.